The orange hold tag was still looped around my wrist when Dana Pike pushed my complaint back across the conference table. At Monday's HR meeting, I reported my manager's retaliation, I said. Dana folded her hands over the folder. What you're describing sounds less like retaliation and more like a personality issue. You may need to be less sensitive to operational decisions. Grant Mercer sat beside her, one ankle resting on his knee. He smirked while Dana, Bellwether Foods' HR director, closed my case. I stayed quiet because an outside partner had witnessed every date. The next morning, at 8:17, one message reached the boardroom. Norcross Packaging had sent its own commissioning timeline. It matched mine line for line. The vendor had spoken. I should have felt vindicated when I saw the subject line. Instead, standing alone at a folding table beside the employee lockers, I felt the same cold dread I'd felt when Grant first asked me to change one small word. 3 weeks earlier, I was in Cooler 2, arguing with a pallet of tomato bisque. The pallet was winning. "It's soup," Luis said from the doorway. "Soup shouldn't have this much authority." Luis Ortega supervised first shift and had the permanent expression of a man who had just remembered he'd left an oven on. He hadn't. Probably. "It's 1,800 pounds of soup," I said. "That gives it seniority." I pressed my thumb against the edge of a plastic lid. The cup looked perfect. Burgundy sleeve, cream lettering, a photograph of Basil that had never seen the inside of our building. But the seal gave slightly under my thumb. Luis stopped smiling. "How many?" "3 from this case." "That's not what I asked." I looked past him at the 6 shrink-wrapped pallets waiting under the cooler lights. Condensation silvered the pipes overhead. "I need another sample from each lane." He rubbed both hands over his face. "Trucks are at 9. Then the drivers can enjoy our excellent break room coffee. Elena, get me 60 cups." He glanced at the orange tags clipped to my belt. "Grant's going to throw himself into the river." "There's barely enough water in that river to cover his shoes." That got half a laugh. Then Luis went for the cups. Bellwether Foods sat outside Rockford in a low brick building that had been expanded so many times, nobody agreed on its shape. We made refrigerated soups, sauces, pestos, and the spinach dip sold under 6 different grocery store labels. The company had started with Walter Bellwether selling chowder from a rented church kitchen. By the time I arrived, Walter's 2 daughters owned most of it, a private investor owned the uncomfortable remainder, and 240 people spent their days trying to keep dairy, tree nuts, steam, forklifts, and ambition from colliding. My job was to notice collisions early. Every afternoon at 4, I walked both production floors with a red grease pencil behind my ear. I checked hold tags, cooler temperatures, sanitation releases, and whatever else had become urgent while people were pretending it wasn't. The orange tags were simple cardstock with a reinforced hole and cotton string. Product hold, date, time, reason, authorized by. People joked that I could tie one to a thunderstorm. 8 years earlier, one of those tags had stopped 40 cases of walnut pesto from leaving with basil pesto labels. After that, the jokes became warmer. At 8:42 that morning, the seal on cup number 47 peeled back with almost no resistance. Luis swore softly. I tied the first tag around the pallet's corner post and wrote, "Pressure loss after chill." The string caught under my thumbnail. I pulled it free with my teeth. "You want me to stop the line?" Luis asked. "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." He looked through the cooler window toward the new filler, where stainless steel rails curved under white light. "That line cost more than my house. It cost more than my building." "You don't own a building." "Exactly." He radioed the line operator. The conveyor slowed, cups bunching behind the gate like commuters at a broken turnstile. My phone vibrated before the belt stopped. Grant. He had a talent for arriving while a problem was still deciding what it wanted to become. By the time I got to the filler room, he was standing beside the control panel in a Navy quarter zip, listening to the Norcross field engineer with his head tilted. That listening posture was one of his better tools. Grant rarely interrupted. He let people finish, then repeated the useful part in cleaner language until it sounded as though the two of you had reached his conclusion together. Priya Shah, the engineer, had one palm against the filler housing. "The jaw pressure is within range now," she said, "but I need to compare it to the event log from last night. Grant saw me. There she is. Tell me we're overreacting." "We're reacting to failed seals." "How many?" 4 out of 47 tested, from a run of 14,000. Priya looked from him to me. "Post-chill failures?" 12 hours, I said. All 4 looked clean at packout. She nodded once. That bothered Grant more than if she had agreed loudly. He turned to the cups moving toward the accumulation table. "Elena, I've got 2 buyers flying in Thursday. This launch is the reason we got approval for second shift." "I know. Do you? Because 38 people here stop the line differently than you do." Behind him, an operator named Renee pretended to adjust a stack of lids. Grant knew she could hear him. So did I. "I'm putting the affected product on hold while we test," I said. "That's what hold means. It isn't disposal." "How long?" "Priya?" "If Norcross can remote pull the full event log, 2 hours, she said. "If the controller didn't capture it, I'll need to reproduce the condition." Grant's jaw shifted. "Which means?" "Tomorrow, maybe." He walked with me into the corridor, away from the line. The door sealed behind us, muting the machinery to a steady metallic hum. "I'm not asking you to release bad product," he said. "I didn't say you were. I'm asking you to use proportion. 4 cups can be handling damage. In 4 different cases from 3 lanes? You found stranger things. That's why you pay me." He smiled then, quick and almost genuine. Grant liked resistance when he believed he could convert it. "And we should probably pay you more. Put that in writing. I'll put anything in writing if you give me a path to 9 o'clock trucks. Move the trucks. Elena. Test retained samples from the previous batch. Increase this batch to a statistically meaningful pull. Let Priya review the pressure log. If those are clean, we discuss a conditional release." His eyes narrowed, not with anger, but concentration. "Conditional how?" "Local distribution only, temperature loggers in each truck, receiving inspection at the customer." "That's expensive. So is soup in a grocery bag." He breathed out through his nose. "Fine. Write it." That was Grant at his best, fast, practical, willing to spend money once he accepted that the cheaper door was locked. He moved the trucks, reassigned the crew to sanitation training, and called the buyer himself. By noon, people were describing the shutdown as a controlled verification instead of a failure. At 1:15, Priya found the pressure dip. It lasted 11 seconds during the previous night's sanitation cycle. The event log showed the sensor recovering, but the graph had a flat notch in it like a skipped heartbeat. "Could that cause the seals?" I asked. "Could," she said. "I can't say did." Grant leaned over her laptop. "The machine ran 6 hours after that." "Yes. With every in-process check passing." "Yes. So this is incidental." Priya closed one window and opened another. "I didn't say that." He tapped the screen with one finger. "But you can't connect it." "Not yet." There was a pause just long enough to turn everyone's posture formal. Grant straightened. "I need your preliminary service note before you leave." "You'll have it." "Call it a transient sensor event." Priya's face stayed pleasant. "I'll call it what the log supports." "Which is a transient event, which is an unexplained pressure deviation following sanitation." He gave a small laugh. "Engineers. Operations managers," she returned. I looked down to hide my smile. Priya saw anyway. The retained samples passed. The expanded batch did not. 9 more lids loosened after we placed the cups in a colder section of Cooler 2. Grant approved the local hold, canceled the trucks, and spent the rest of the afternoon finding work for the idle crew. At 4, I began my walk. The first orange tag hung from the bisque pallet in Cooler 2. The second marked 2 cases in the lab. The third was on a tote of mushroom sauce waiting for a label correction. I counted each one, checked its log entry, and initialed the lower corner. When I reached the test kitchen, Grant was sitting on the edge of my desk. He held my draft deviation report. The glass walls made every conversation visible, though not audible. Outside, 2 product developers moved very slowly between the spice shelves. "This is good," he said. "If you sound that surprised, I'm charging extra. It's clear, it's factual, it also creates a problem we don't have." He handed me the report. One sentence was underlined. "Operations requested release prior to completion of expanded seal verification." "That happened," I said. "I asked for options. You asked for 9 o'clock trucks. And when you explained the risk, I moved them." That's in the next sentence. "The customer's quality people will read the first one." "They should." He slid off the desk. "Change requested release to requested accelerated verification. That isn't the same thing. It's more accurate. No, it's more comfortable." His expression cooled, then recovered. "You know what your issue is? I use semicolons when commas would do. You treat every conversation like sworn testimony, only the memorable ones. I'm trying to build something here. Second shift, another line, maybe another plant. That means we can't write internal reports like we're prosecuting each other." I thought of the 47 cups, the loose lid under my thumb. If the sentence is unfair, write your response. I'll attach it. He studied me for a moment. "You froze at Harrow, didn't you?" The room seemed to lose a degree. I had told him about Harrow Foods once, after 2 beers at a supplier dinner in Milwaukee. A vice president had blamed my team for a contaminated ingredient release during a meeting with 30 people. I'd had the emails proving otherwise on the screen in front of me. When he demanded an answer, my throat closed. Another manager spoke for me. I resigned 6 weeks later. Grant had called that vice president a bully. Now he picked a fleck of dried red grease pencil from my desk and rolled it beneath his thumb. "I'm not attacking you," he said. "I'm saying you sometimes make the record carry what you don't want to say in the room." I said no in the room. To me, quietly. "You heard it. So did 3 people who now think I tried to ship unsafe product. You did try to ship product before a verification was complete." His mouth tightened. Outside the glass, the product developers had abandoned all pretense and disappeared. Grant placed the grease pencil flake in my trash can. "Make the wording change by end of day." That report has my name on it. It also belongs to Bellwether. He left before I answered. I kept the sentence. The next morning, my access to the filler event log stopped working. IT called it a permissions cleanup. Grant called it an inconvenience. He forwarded me a PDF export and asked whether that solved the problem. It did, if the only problem was seeing the information he had selected. At 10, Priya arrived with a pressure gauge in a black case. I met her beside the line. "Morning," she said. "You look homicidal." "Permissions cleanup." Ah, the bloodless murder. She set the case on a stainless table and unclipped it. Inside, every instrument had its own fitted hollow. "I brought an independent transducer. We'll run hot, chill overnight, and test tomorrow. Put every observation in the service note." She glanced up. "I always do." "I know. I'm saying it out loud for a reason." Priya studied my face, then nodded. "Understood." Across the room, Grant watched us over the top of his coffee. At the production meeting that afternoon, he announced that seal verification would move to night shift, under operations, to eliminate unnecessary handoffs. He praised my caution, thanked Priya for her flexibility, and assigned me to review supplier specifications in my office. The decision was polished enough to sound like respect. Then he walked to the white production board. My name was written beside launch release in blue magnetic letters. Grant peeled them off one at a time, ELENA. He dropped the letters into the tray and replaced them with Grant. 40 people found reasons to look at the board, their shoes, or the paper cups in their hands. Louise stared directly at me. I reached behind my ear and took out my red grease pencil. "Who has authority to remove the orange holds?" I asked. Grant capped the marker. "Operations will coordinate with quality." That wasn't my question. His smile returned, thinner this time. And that was the moment he understood I was going to make him answer. "Quality can recommend a hold," Grant said. "Operations owns production. Quality owns release. Under the old launch structure. There is no old launch structure. There's the food safety plan we filed, and my name is on it." A few people became deeply interested in their agendas. Grant set the marker in the tray. "Then we'll update the plan. You can update reporting lines. You can't transfer release authority in a production meeting. I'm not doing this with you here. You started it here." His face changed for half a second. Not anger exactly. Recognition. He had expected me to feel exposed and retreat. Instead, I had made the exposure mutual. Luis cleared his throat. "For tonight, do the tags stay?" Grant looked at him. "Yes." "And who can remove them?" Grant's gaze came back to me. "Elena." Luis wrote that on his agenda in block letters. It was a small thing. It felt enormous. Grant ended the meeting 2 minutes early. People left in tight clusters, speaking in voices that didn't quite become conversation until they reached the hall. I stayed long enough to photograph the production board. Grant watched me do it. "You think that helps?" he asked. "I think boards get erased." "That's your problem. Everything's evidence. Only after someone changes it." He picked up the blue letters spelling my name and held them out. "You want these?" I looked at his open palm. "Leave them in the tray." He let them fall. The plastic clattered against the metal channel. At 6 that evening, I took my 4 o'clock walk 2 hours late. The bisque pallets were still in cooler 2. The orange tags were intact. I checked the hold log on the tablet mounted outside the door and saw my entries, plus a new note from Grant. Verification transferred to third shift for expedited resolution. He had learned from the report. He didn't ask for release this time. He changed who would create the fax. I called Priya. She answered over road noise. "I'm attempting to eat a granola bar without becoming part of an insurance statistic. Pull over." I am pulled over. "The granola bar is unusually aggressive. Who's running the overnight test?" "You and me, according to the protocol." Grant told the floor it was transferred to third shift. Silence, then the rustle of paper. I told him Norcross needed an authorized quality witness. He may have heard the word witness and developed a rash. Should I come back? I looked through the cooler window. The shrink wrap reflected the fluorescent tubes in long white streaks. No. Email the protocol to me and Grant. State that any test outside it won't be considered a Norcross verification. I can do that. And copy your project manager. Another pause. Is there a larger problem? Yes. Can you tell me what it is? Not yet. All right, I'll write narrowly. That was one reason I trusted Priya. She didn't demand intimacy as the price of help. Her email arrived 12 minutes later. Grant replied at 6:31. Agreed. No deviation intended. At 7:05, he sent a separate message to me. Please report to my office at 7:30 tomorrow to discuss communication expectations. I printed both. His office overlooked the warehouse where forklifts carried finished cases through lanes marked in yellow paint. On the wall behind his desk hung a framed black and white photograph of Bellwether's original delivery van. Grant hadn't been with the company long enough to feel sentimental about it, but he understood the value of standing near other people's history. He had someone from HR with him when I arrived. Marcy Hall was an HR generalist with blunt bangs and a notebook she never seemed to write in. She smiled at me apologetically. "This is informal," Grant said. "Then why is HR here?" "To help us communicate." Marcy's smile tightened. Grant pointed to the chair across from him. I sat. He began with my strengths: thoroughness, technical judgment, loyalty to the customer. Then came the bridge word. However, my communication had become adversarial. I challenged decisions in public. I copied outside parties unnecessarily. I used compliance language in ways that escalated normal disagreements. "Which outside party?" I asked. "Norcross." They wrote the test protocol. "You could have come to me. You had already told the production floor something different. That is the exact tone I'm talking about." What tone? He glanced at Marcy. She looked down at her blank notebook. Grant folded his hands. You assume bad faith. I assume a written protocol says what it says. This isn't about the protocol. This is about your ability to function on a cross-functional team. I felt the old warning in my throat, a tightening beneath the jaw. At Harrow, it had climbed until my voice disappeared. I put both feet flat on the floor and pressed my thumbnail into the side of my index finger. What do you want me to do differently? I asked. Bring concerns to me privately before airing them in a group. I asked a question about release authority in the meeting where you publicly removed my name from release authority. You're doing it again. Answering. Litigating. Marcy finally uncapped her pen. Maybe we could identify some forward-looking behaviors. Good idea, Grant said. Elena, before copying vendors or executives, discuss the issue with me. If you disagree with an operational decision, raise it privately. And work on receiving feedback without becoming defensive. Will Grant also raise changes to my authority privately? Grant leaned back. This isn't my coaching session. Marcy wrote something at last. I left with a one-page coaching memo. And the strange, clean calm that comes when a bad situation stops pretending to be ambiguous. The overnight crew never ran the test. They set up for it, but the new pressure gauge required an adapter Norcross hadn't shipped. At 5:12 the next morning, a mechanic returned the filler to production configuration so sanitation could begin. Grant's daily update described the attempt as completed without reproducing seal failure. I read the sentence twice. Then I walked to maintenance. Omar Velez was rebuilding a pump seal at his workbench. He wore magnifying glasses clipped over his safety lenses, which made his eyes look enormous when he glanced up. I wondered when you'd get here, he said. Was the verification completed? No. Did the line run? For maybe 90 seconds, water only. Any test cups? No adapter. Who was present? Me, Renee, Dale from sanitation. And Grant, first 20 minutes. I put the printed update on his bench. Omar read it without touching it, his hands black with grease. That's slippery. It's false. He'll say completed means the attempt was completed. That sentence went to the owners. Omar removed the magnifiers. What are you asking me for? The maintenance work order. His shoulders lowered a fraction. Grant told us he'd close it. Did he? You know he did. I did. A closed work order could still be viewed, but I no longer had permissions to the maintenance module. Omar. He looked toward the open doorway. I have 12 people. Most of them live on overtime. I'm not asking you to take a side. You're standing in my shop with his email in your hand. Fair. I folded the update. If somebody asks whether the test was completed, tell the truth. I always tell the truth. I know. No, you know I tell you the truth. That's not the same thing around here anymore. I left without the work order. At 9, Priya arrived with the missing adapter. She listened while I explained the overnight attempt, her mouth flattening by degrees. Nobody called me, she said. I know. She opened her laptop on a stainless cart. The controller records every run. My access is gone. Mine isn't. She logged in through the Norcross service portal and pulled the machine history. The 90-second water cycle sat between sanitation events, time-stamped and unhelpfully precise. Can you export that? I asked. It automatically goes into my service report. Does Grant review the report before it's final? He can comment. He can't edit our source log. There it was, a boundary Grant didn't own. Priya looked at the orange tags visible through the cooler door. Take me through this from the first failure. I did. Not the feelings, not the smirk, not Harrow. Dates, times, decisions. She took notes in a narrow black notebook, occasionally stopping me to ask who had been physically present. When we finished, she said, "My project manager will want this escalated internally." Because of the machine? Because Grant asked me yesterday whether Norcross could issue a commissioning certificate based on warm seal results. My fingers went still around the grease pencil. What did you say? That commissioning includes post-chill verification. Did he ask by phone? Yes, of course he had. Priya saw my expression. I sent a follow-up email confirming our conversation. The first genuine relief I had felt in days came so quickly it embarrassed me. She pretended not to notice. "Let's run the test." The seals failed after 11 hours. Not dramatically. No lids flying off, no soup spreading across the cooler floor. We found 6 weak edges in the first sample and 4 in the second. Quiet failures were worse. They could survive our dock, survive the truck, and loosen while a customer lifted the cup from a shelf. I expanded the hold to the next production lot. Grant did not argue with me. He stood in cooler 2, read my tag, and said, "Understood." That scared me more than shouting would have. By lunch, he had removed me from the private label launch meetings. The calendar cancellations arrived one after another, each with the same gray sentence. "Organizer has removed you from this event." At 2, IT disabled my ability to place electronic holds. Paper tags still carried authority, but the inventory system no longer accepted my code. At 3, Grant sent an organizational update naming himself Launch Decision Owner and assigning me to documentation support. At 4, my folding table appeared beside the employee lockers. My computer, phone, and 2 banker's boxes sat on top. Someone had placed my red coffee mug carefully between them. My office was already occupied by a project scheduler Grant had borrowed from finance. Luis found me standing there. "Tell me this is temporary," he said. "I was told it improves access to the floor. You can smell the men's locker room. Operational access." He looked toward Grant's office, then back at me. "What do you need?" The answer rose instantly. "Say it where people can hear you. Tell him this is wrong. Give me the work order. Put my name back on the board." Instead, I said, "Photograph every orange tag before your shift touches it. Include the pallet label and a clock if you can." Luis's face changed. "Are they removing them?" "I don't know." "You think they might?" "I think boards get erased." He understood the reference. "Okay. Don't use your personal phone. Use the quality tablet. Upload them to the batch record. That goes through Grant now. It also goes to the customer archive." A corner of his mouth moved. "You always were romantic." My complaint to HR took 9 pages and 6 attachments. I wrote it at the folding table while employees opened lockers behind me and tried not to read over my shoulder. I listed the production board change, the coaching memo, the removed meetings, the disabled access, the altered title, and the desk relocation. I tied each action to the day I refused to change the deviation report. I did not accuse Grant of wanting unsafe products shipped. I did not guess at motive. I wrote what happened and when. Dana Pike acknowledged it 20 minutes later. She interviewed me on Thursday and Grant on Friday. Over the weekend, Grant prepared as if for an audit. He restored my electronic hold access, added me back to one launch meeting, and sent a gracious note about resetting our partnership. Monday morning, he entered HR carrying a leather portfolio and offered me coffee. I declined. Dana asked questions whose wording told me she had accepted his frame before I sat down. Had Grant ever threatened my job? Had my salary changed? Was moving my desk within his authority? Could meeting attendance evolve during a launch? Then she pushed my folder back across the table and called it a personality issue. What I had not seen in the cold dread of that moment was Grant's left thumb. He rubbed it across the edge of his portfolio whenever Dana mentioned Norcross. After the meeting, I returned to the folding table. My annual bonus statement waited in a sealed envelope. Payment deferred pending successful completion of a 60-day performance plan. That afternoon, Luis walked past without stopping. Omar closed the maintenance door while I was still in the corridor. Even Marcy took the longer route to the copier. At 8:17 Tuesday morning, my inbox refreshed. Priya's message was addressed to Grant, Dana, the Bellwether owners, Norcross's project manager, and the outside directors gathered for the launch review. Correction to Bellwether commissioning record. I opened the attachment. The first line began with the date I tied on the first orange tag. The timeline did not accuse anyone of anything. That made it worse. Priya had written it like a machine manual. Dates, times, observations, requests, responses. At 9:18 Monday, Elena Marlowe placed lots B114 through B116 on hold following post-chill seal failures. At 10:06, Grant Mercer requested release options before completion of expanded verification. At 1:07, Mr. Mercer asked that the preliminary service note describe the pressure deviation as transient. Norcross declined pending analysis. There were entries for the protocol email, the incomplete overnight test, and Grant's request for a commissioning certificate based on warm seal results. Priya had attached controller data showing the 90-second water cycle. She had also included a photograph taken during the production meeting to document the line configuration on the whiteboard. My name was still on the board in that photograph. The image time was 2:41. Mine, taken after the meeting, was time-stamped 3:09. My letters were in the tray. Grant's name occupied the release box. The last paragraph was from Priya's project manager. Norcross cannot certify commissioning until post-chill failures are resolved. We are also unable to reconcile Bellwether's statement that verification was completed with the equipment event log. This correction is being distributed to all commissioning stakeholders to protect the accuracy of the joint project record. No outrage, no adjectives, no personality. A calendar notification appeared over the document. Launch review. Location changed. Main boardroom. Required attendees now included me. Grant reached my table before I could stand. He held his phone in one hand, the email open on the screen. What did you tell her? The locker room door swung open behind him. Dale from sanitation stepped out, saw us, and went directly back inside. I answered Priya's questions. What did you tell her to send? Nothing. You expect me to believe she woke up and copied our board because she's concerned about sentence structure? I expect you to read the part where you asked her company to certify incomplete testing. His voice dropped. You coordinated an external escalation during an internal HR review. She didn't know about the HR review. She knew enough to build your timeline. She built the machine timeline. The fact that it's mine, too, is your problem. His grip tightened around the phone. For a second, I thought he might slam it onto the table. Instead, he set it down very carefully beside my coffee mug. You don't understand what you've done, he said. I didn't send it. You made sure someone would. That landed harder because there was a sliver of truth in it. I had asked Priya to write narrowly. I had insisted on acknowledgments and service notes. I had wanted a record beyond Grant's reach. I looked at the folding table, the banker's boxes, the envelope deferring my bonus. Yes, I said. I made sure the work was documented. His face settled into something almost sad. You could have been part of this. I was? No. You stood beside it with a clipboard waiting for it to fail. He picked up his phone and walked away. The main boardroom smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish and burnt coffee. Walter Bellwether's portrait hung above a cabinet full of old soup labels. In every photograph, he wore the same dark tie and looked mildly disappointed by refrigeration. His daughters sat at opposite ends of the long table. Anne Bellwether, the chief executive, had inherited his ability to make silence feel like an invoice. Her younger sister, Ruth, chaired the board and still came to the plant twice a week, usually in shoes poorly suited to production floors. 3 outside directors joined by video. Dana sat near the wall with a legal pad. Grant had taken the chair closest to the display screen. My usual place in launch reviews had been halfway down the table. That chair was occupied by a stack of binders, so I sat beside Dana. She moved her legal pad 3 inches away from me. Anne began without greeting anyone. Norcross is joining in 10 minutes. Before they do, I want to understand why this is the first I'm seeing of an unresolved commissioning dispute. Grant answered smoothly. Because it wasn't a dispute until Norcross turned a normal technical investigation into a contractual defense. Did you ask them to certify based on warm results? Ruth asked. I asked whether stage certification was possible. Their equipment passed every inline test. We have a post-chill issue they haven't connected to the filler. You asked for a certificate, Anne said. I asked a vendor to stand behind a $4 million machine. He was good. Even after the email, even with the dates projected behind him, he could take the most dangerous fact and place it inside a reasonable frustration. Anne turned to me. "Did you ask Norcross to send this?" "No." "Did you provide them information?" I answered technical questions about the test sequence. "Did you tell them about your complaint?" "No." Dana shifted beside me. "Elena's complaint is a confidential personnel matter." Ruth looked at her. "Then why does their timeline match it?" Dana's mouth opened, but Grant spoke first. "Because Elena converted an operational disagreement into a retaliation claim. Of course, the dates overlap. Every action she complained about arose from the launch." "The desk?" I asked. Anne held up one hand. "Not yet." Grant did not look at me. The desk move was intended to put quality closer to production. Ruth's eyebrows rose. "Beside the lockers? We are out of offices." "My office is occupied by a finance project scheduler," I said. Grant turned then. "Because launch scheduling became full-time work after you held 14,000 units. 13,840. One of the outside directors removed his glasses. Grant gave a tired little laugh. "That. Exactly that." For one ugly second, I could hear myself through his ears, precise when the room wanted reassurance, correcting 60 cups while people were asking whether the company could keep its biggest customer. Anne heard it too. "Elena, the distinction is not material. It is to the inventory record. This isn't an inventory review. No, it's a review of whether records matter only when the numbers are convenient." Dana touched my sleeve under the table, a warning disguised as comfort. Priya appeared on the screen with a man introduced as Martin Keene, Norcross's project manager. Martin did most of the talking. He confirmed that the filler could not be certified, that his company's service log was generated independently, and that Grant's requested wording would have understated the unresolved deviation. Grant asked whether Norcross had identified a mechanical defect. "No," Martin said. "An electrical defect?" "No." "A software defect?" "Not at this time." "So your machine has no identified defect, yet Norcross copied my board to imply bellwether misrepresented testing." Martin's expression remained even. "The event log shows the verification protocol was not performed because your technician arrived without an adapter." Priya leaned toward her camera. "The adapter was listed in the installation package as customer supplied." Grant looked at Omar, who had joined at the far end of the table. "Maintenance?" Omar cleared his throat. "The installation list went through project management, which meant Grant." He glanced down at the table after he said it. Grant recovered quickly. "Fine. We missed an adapter. That does not explain the seals." "No," Priya said. "It explains why the test was incomplete. A small sentence, another locked door. Anne asked Norcross for 48 hours to conduct a joint technical review. Martin agreed, provided Bellwether preserved all machine, sanitation, and quality records." The call ended. Ruth closed her binder. "Grant, leave us for a few minutes." His chair did not move. "We have a customer decision at noon," he said. "They're holding shelf space based on a ship date we already missed." "Then wait in your office," Anne said. He gathered his papers slowly. At the door, he looked at me. "Elena knows the launch better than anyone," he said. "Whatever else happens, don't let this turn into a technical process run by people who want to punish me." Then he left. It was a smart thing to say. It reminded them he was useful, made himself sound vulnerable, and placed revenge in the room before I could. Dana began speaking as soon as the door shut. "I want to separate the commissioning issue from the employee relations matter." "You already separated them," Ruth said. "That appears to be the problem." "I made a finding based on the information available. You had Elena's timeline." "I did not have corroboration." "You had her attachments," I said. Dana's cheeks colored. "You had concerns about management style and access changes. That is different from an independent vendor alleging record inconsistency." Anne pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. "We cannot lose this account. We also cannot ship a seal failure. What do you need to complete the review, Elena?" The practical answer came easily. My access restored. The full controller log, maintenance work orders, sanitation cycle records, PRIA on-site, 2 overnight chill tests. But the envelope at my folding table was still sealed along one edge where I had opened it carefully. Grant had learned he could take my authority, return pieces when challenged, and call the restoration partnership. "I need the terms in writing," I said. Anne lowered her hand. "What terms?" "Quality retains release authority under the existing food safety plan. My access is restored to the filler, inventory, and maintenance systems. No launch record is edited without a visible revision history. Norcross participates in testing. All related records are preserved." Ruth nodded. Anne did not. "What else?" Anne asked. "My performance plan and bonus deferral are suspended pending review." Dana turned toward me. "Those are separate personnel actions. They started after I refused to change the deviation report. They address communication. Then they can survive a review." Anne's gaze sharpened. "Are you refusing to perform your job?" "I'm refusing to sign a product release while the company is also saying I lack the judgment to communicate about that release." The boardroom went very still. My throat tightened, but my voice held. "If my judgment is unreliable, use someone else's signature. If you need mine, restore the authority that makes it meaningful." Anne looked toward her sister. Ruth gave the smallest shrug, as if to say the choice had always been that plain. "You'll have a written interim directive within the hour," Anne said. "Grant remains operations manager. He knows the customer, the staffing plan, and the line. You will both participate in the review." Dana started to object. Anne looked at her. "You'll reopen the complaint." My bonus remained deferred. The performance plan was suspended, not withdrawn. Grant kept his title, his office, and control over nearly everything except release. It was not victory. It was permission to keep working inside a conflict that now had better lighting. The first person waiting outside the boardroom was Luis. He held the quality tablet against his chest. "I heard we're preserving records. Who told you?" Omar came out for coffee and used the phrase, "preserving records," 6 times. Omar passed behind him carrying an empty mug. "Legal vocabulary makes me thirsty." Luis handed me the tablet. "Photos are in the customer archive. Every tag, every shift. There were 32 images. Each showed an orange tag beside a pallet label and the digital cooler clock. On the second night, 2 tags had different knots. I zoomed in. My tags used a square knot. These had simple bows." "Who removed the originals?" I asked. Luis shook his head. "They were already changed when first shift came in." "Were the lots moved?" "One pallet went to the staging lane, then came back. The inventory record showed no movement because the electronic holds had blocked it. But the cooler's temperature logger was visible in Luis's photograph, mounted on the post behind the pallet. At 5:48, it read 34 degrees. In the next photograph, taken 90 minutes later after the pallet returned, it read 39. Grant had not shipped the product. He had moved it into the warmer staging lane to retest the seals under conditions more likely to pass. When I showed Anne, she stared at the photographs for a long time. Grant admitted the move. He called it a controlled evaluation and produced an email he had sent to Dale authorizing it. He had documented just enough to turn concealment into methodology. "The product never left the building," he said in the technical review. "The tags were replaced because the originals tore during movement. Elena is interpreting every decision through the assumption that I'm dishonest." "Why wasn't quality notified?" Anne asked. "Because her electronic hold prevented release. There was no risk." It was maddening because he had used my control to justify working around me. It was also competent. The pallets remained blocked. Ruth removed Grant's authority to direct testing without written approval. He accepted the decision with a calm that told me he had already moved to his next offense. At noon, the customer gave Bellwether until Friday to produce a corrective plan. After that, the shelf space would go to another supplier. We had 3 days. Priya, Omar, Luis, and I took over the test kitchen. Grant attended every session, polite and indispensable. He knew which labor schedules could bend, which ingredients were expiring, which trucking slots could be moved. He also began copying Anne on every question I could not immediately answer. Why did failures increase after colder storage? Why did 2 lanes fail more often than the others? Why had quality approved the sanitation cycle during factory acceptance testing? The last question sat on my screen like a hook. I had approved that cycle. 6 months earlier, before the launch pressure, Norcross had run the filler through its standard hot water sanitation program. The cycle passed. The sensor graph was clean. I pulled the old report and laid it beside the recent event logs. Priya leaned over my shoulder. Omar set down his coffee. The standard cycle held the final air purge for 4 minutes. The current cycle held it for 90 seconds. Who changed that? I asked. Omar's face went flat. Operations requested a time study. Grant, standing across the room, stopped writing. Priya scrolled through the controller revisions. The pressure sensor sits below the rinse manifold. If the purge ends early, moisture could remain around the connection. And the cooler makes it contract, I said. Omar was already reaching for his tools. Grant closed his notebook. A 4-minute purge cannot explain a launch this late. Maybe not, Priya said. She looked at the condensation beading along the sensor cable. But it explains what we test next. Omar disconnected the sensor while Priya pulled the revision history. A bead of water clung to the underside of the connector. It swelled, trembled, and dropped onto Omar's glove. "There's your transient event," he said. Grant stepped closer. "There's condensation all over a refrigerated plant." "Not inside a sealed pressure connection," Priya said. "Then the connection failed. Or it stayed wet because the purge was shortened, which your machine allowed." Priya gave him a level look. "Your car allows you to drive into a pond." Omar coughed into his shoulder. It did nothing to hide the laugh. Grant ignored him. "We have until Friday. How long to establish cause?" "To establish it?" Priya asked. 2 full cycles, short purge and standard purge, identical conditions. Then 12 hours of chill for each batch. That's a day we don't have. "It's 24 hours you do have," I said. "The customer wants a corrective plan, not finished product. They want confidence. So do I. You don't have to sell it to them. I have to sign it." Anne had joined by phone. Her voice came from the speaker in the center of the table. "Run both cycles." Grant leaned toward the phone. "Anne, if we consume another day testing the obvious, then make the obvious useful," she said. "Document it." He stared at the speaker after she disconnected. Priya handed Omar a replacement connector from her case. "We'll use the existing one for the short purge trial. New one for the standard cycle." "Why replace it?" Grant asked. "Because if the longer purge passes with a wet, compromised connector, you'll argue the connector recovered. If I replace it, you'll argue the replacement fixed it. So we run the old connector dry first, verify baseline, then introduce the cycle conditions." He considered that and nodded. "Good." It was the first thing he had said all day without turning it into a contest. We began at 3. Renee ran the filler while Luis checked cups at the discharge. Dale handled sanitation, reading every step aloud from the approved protocol. He kept his voice flat and his eyes on the page. When he reached the air purge, Grant asked, "Who entered the 90-second setting?" Dale's finger stopped on the screen. "I did." "On whose authority?" Dale looked at me, then at Omar. "Answer him," I said. Grant gave us the time study sheet. "Did I tell you to make it permanent?" The sheet said revised standard. "Do you have it?" Dale's throat moved. "It was paper." Grant spread his hands. "Then we have one employee's memory of wording on a sheet nobody retained." Luis set down a case of empty cups too hard. "Easy." Everyone heard him. Grant turned. "You have something to add?" Luis met his eyes. "Just trying not to crack the cups." The room felt one careless word away from becoming something else. I stepped between the filler and the stainless table. "Run the cycle," I said. Dale pressed start. Steam clouded the sight glass. Water hammered through the manifold, then drained. At 90 seconds, the air purge stopped. Omar had fitted a clear sleeve around the pressure connection so we could see without touching it. At first, there was nothing. Grant checked his watch. Then a faint haze formed inside the sleeve. Priya crouched beside it. "Photograph every 30 seconds. I used the quality tablet. The condensation gathered slowly, too slowly to feel dramatic. By the time we started the filler, 3 droplets had reached the base of the connector. Warm seal checks passed. Grant paced behind us, which is what they've always done." "We know," I said. We loaded the test cups into Cooler 2 and placed temperature loggers at the front, middle, and rear. Luis tied orange tags to the test pallets. He used square knots. The next morning, the first weak seal appeared in lane 2. The second came from lane 4. By the time Priya finished the sample, we had 11 failures. The pressure graph showed the same flat notch as the launch run. Grant stood with both palms against the lab counter. "One cycle," he said. "You still need the control." "We're starting it now," I said. He looked exhausted. For the first time since the hold began, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had missed a patch shaving near his jaw. "If the 4-minute purge passes, what's the correction?" he asked. "Restore the approved cycle," Priya said. "Replace the affected connector and sensor. Add a moisture check after sanitation. Norcross will install a shield and update the alarm logic so the event can't clear without acknowledgement." "How long?" 4 days, including validation. "We lose the shelf." "Maybe," I said. His head came up. "You sound very calm about that." "I'm not calm, I'm accurate. That distinction must be comforting at night. It beats changing words until the problem disappears." He flinched. I had finally found the place beneath his armor, and the satisfaction lasted less than a second. Up close, he didn't look like a man plotting to poison strangers. He looked like someone who had tied his whole future to a schedule and then started trimming reality to fit it. He lowered his voice. "Do you know what happens if this launch fails? We lose the account. We lose second shift. We delay the second plant. 38 people who trained for those positions go back to waiting for overtime. Ann's investor starts asking whether the family can scale. Every improvement I made becomes a footnote to the launch Elena stopped." "I didn't shorten the purge." "No, you just get to be right about it." He walked out before I could answer. The standard purge run was almost boring. 4 minutes of air moved through the line. The clear sleeve stayed dry. Warm seals passed. After 12 hours in the cooler, the first sample passed, then the second. Priya expanded the pull until the lab counters were covered in cups of tomato bisque. Every seal held. Omar brought me the maintenance work order near midnight. He had printed it from an administrator's terminal. The original request described a sanitation cycle time study. The mechanic's note recommended retaining the 4-minute purge until quality and Norcross validated any reduction. The closing comment read, 90-second purge accepted as revised production standard per operations. Grant had closed it himself. "I should have given you this the first time," Omar said. "You have 12 people." That sounded better in my head than it does now. I folded the pages along the staple. "Were you protecting them or protecting yourself?" He looked toward the cooler. "Both." "Thank you for telling me. That isn't forgiveness." "I know." He seemed relieved that I had not offered it. Our corrective plan went to the customer Thursday afternoon. Grant drafted the first version. It described a moisture-sensitive Norcross component and a sanitation parameter, implemented during commissioning. I changed that sentence. Bellwether operations reduced the validated final air purge from 4 minutes to 90 seconds without completing post-chill verification. Grant rejected the edit. I restored it and added the controller graphs, Luis's temperature photographs, Priya's service timeline, and the maintenance work order. Each piece answered another. The orange tags established which lots had moved. The cooler clocks showed the conditions. The controller log showed what the machine had actually done. The work order showed the shortened cycle was supposed to remain a trial. Anne called us both into the boardroom. "You agree on the corrective action," she said. "You disagree on the description of cause. The customer doesn't need our internal blame assignment," Grant said. "It isn't blame," I said. "It's the uncontrolled change. The component should not collect moisture. That's why Norcross is adding the shield. We still created the condition." Anne read both versions. Ruth sat beside her, turning my red grease pencil between her fingers. I had left it on the table after marking the graphs. "If we send Elena's language," Grant said, "we give the customer grounds to audit every process change we've made this year." "They already have that right," I said. "It also makes us look unmanaged." Anne's eyes remained on the document. "Were we?" Grant's answer came a beat late. "In this instance, the change control was incomplete." Ruth set down the pencil. "That is the first clear sentence you've given us." His face hardened. Anne accepted my version with one revision. She changed "without completing" to "before completing," because the company had now finished the verification. I could live with a preposition that still told the truth. The customer accepted the 4-day delay. They required receiving inspections on the first 3 shipments, temperature loggers in each truck, and a joint review after 30 days. It cost Bellwether expedited parts, idle ingredients, weekend labor, and enough air freight to make finance speak in whispers. It did not cost us the account. Before production resumed, Anne met with the launch team on the floor. Grant stood at the edge of the group. "The time study change was initiated by operations and should have remained under validation," she said. "Employees who executed the documented instruction and cooperated with this review will not be disciplined." Dale's shoulders dropped. Renee looked at me once, quickly. Anne continued. "Until the board completes its review, Grant will lead launch planning but will have no authority over plant execution, quality release, or sanitation changes." The words landed without spectacle. People glanced at the whiteboard. Grant's blue letters remained in the release box. He walked to the tray, removed them, and placed them beside mine. He did not put my name back. Neither did I. The printed food safety plan already had it. Dana's review took 5 weeks. She interviewed Priya, Luis, Omar, Marcy, and 2 project schedulers. The company hired an outside investigator, but the findings were ordinary enough. Grant had valid authority to reorganize work and serious business reasons to accelerate the launch. He had also restricted my access, changed my duties, relocated my workspace, and initiated performance action after protected quality objections. Dana had evaluated each event separately and failed to examine the pattern. My performance plan was withdrawn. My office was returned after the scheduler moved into an unused purchasing room. My bonus arrived 2 payroll cycles late. Dana delivered the decision in the same conference room where she had closed my case. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Yes." She waited, perhaps expecting me to make that easier. I didn't. "We're changing the review process," she continued. "Written findings, corroborating interviews, and an appeal outside HR." "Good. I thought you and Grant were escalating each other." "We were." That surprised her. "He was still retaliating," I said. "People can be difficult and right at the same time." Dana glanced at the folder between us. "I called it a personality issue." "You did. I won't do that again." I believe she meant it. Belief was not the same as restored trust. Grant remained at Bellwether for another 3 months. In planning, he found a cheaper cold storage carrier and rebuilt the second shift model around the lost week. The work was good. He presented it to Ruth, answered questions, and left before the plant meetings began. On his last afternoon, he stopped at my office. "I resigned," he said. "I heard. You got what you wanted. I wanted the holds respected. You wanted me to answer. That was true, too." He looked at the red grease pencil behind my ear. "Was it worth it?" I thought of the late bonus, the folding table, Omar closing his door. Luis walking past because fear had made friendship expensive. Ask me after the first shipment. He almost smiled. Still conditional. Usually. Grant left a clean transition binder on Ruth's desk. On the first page, he had flagged a supplier lead time that would have broken the revised launch schedule. Even leaving, he made himself useful. The corrected launch shipped on a Monday. At 4, I walked both floors. The filler held pressure. Sanitation had initialed the full purge. Temperature loggers blinked green inside the trucks. One orange tag remained on the final pallet in Cooler 2. I checked the post-chill results, pressed my thumb against 3 lids, and matched the lot number to the release screen. Luis waited by the door. "Soup still outrank you?" he asked. "Only by weight." I signed my name across the bottom of the tag with the red grease pencil. Then I loosened the square knot and slipped the orange card into my pocket as the pallet rolled toward the dock.